Good evening, ghouls and fiends. Welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'm your host, Tezz, and we are back to talk about the latest in horror news, do a review or two, or maybe even three, and then we're actually going to do a featured presentation. It's been a while, as people would say. It's been a minute. Still don't really understand how that works, but it's been a little while since we've done a featured presentation, so we're going to bring that back for this show. I've just noticed that my camera light isn't on, but you know what? It's really light outside. We don't need it. We don't need that. In terms of sort of updates, I had a lot of fun doing the watch along, the watch party thing last week, following the live show on Twitch, twitch.tv/Tezz, TEZZIUS. We watched a film, if you can call it that, which I will be reviewing later on today's show. And that film is the to-be release Mouse of Horrors. So you may remember a little while ago we talked about this on the news as one of the new film releases. It's part of that whole public domain characters from Disney films, etc., etc., now having horror films made of them. I mean, it's not Disney, but there's Winnie the Pooh, has previously had a couple of entries, and he now has his whole Pooniverse. It has its fans. I'm certainly not one of them. And they now branched out into Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, apparently, but I know that they've had to change the title of this film a number of times, where it's... we'll get to that later on. But that was an experience. And then for the retro reviews, I'm going to be talking about the Brian Yuzna dentist films from the 90s, The Dentist and The Dentist 2, Brace Yourself. And that's going to lead us into our little featured presentation. We're going to have a little chat and a little look at some of the films of Brian Yuzna. I think he's one of those directors who, from the name, some of you may think, I don't know, I'm not familiar, I've not heard of him. But if you're of a certain age or a certain horror fan, you'll have probably come across a film that he's either produced or he's written or he's directed, done all three. He's had his hand in a number of horror pies and has worked with a number of horror directors over the years. So he does have quite a unique stamp out there, but it's a name that you may have seen in the opening credits of a film and just haven't stuck around with, not like a John Carpenter, James Cameron, Wes Craven, but I think he's a bit of an unsung hero in the horror world. We're going to talk about some of the select films of his filmography a bit later on. In terms of updates, we played a bit more of Dead Space. We are now in the penultimate chapter. Did that on Monday. That still scares the crap out of me, but I suppose that's part of the fun. Really enjoying streaming that over on Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok. Do a little multi-stream. And outside of that, we didn't do a Wednesday stream. I was out of the house all day, so we didn't get to do a Wednesday stream. We still haven't set on a chill game for Wednesday to play, but I will do. I will do for sure. And then it's been a busy weekend again, busy week. So I haven't really got around to any additional kind of horror. We're still in that period where if I go on Prime or Netflix, Sky, whatnot, and look for horror, it's kind of either the same old things that are already on those services that I've probably seen before or haven't watched because they look, not very good, or it's you can kind of tell from a release that it's just the artwork or the name. You can usually tell that it's been farted out and there's not really going to be much enjoyment you're going to get out of watching it. And potentially I could be missing out on some great films by taking that approach, but I've gambled enough in the past on films where I think I'll give it a go, and been left wanting to bang my head against a brick wall. So yeah, we haven't really had that many options for fresh horrors, and I haven't even looked at what's out at the cinema at the moment, because again, I kind of feel like we're in a bit of a dry spell. It happens. It'll pick up again, I'm sure. Hopefully we won't have to wait till October. the Halloween spooky season for it to pick up, but it will pick up again, I'm sure. So, without further ado, ghouls and fiends, we're going to get into the latest in the world of horror news. This is the news.
This is God.
There we go. Oh, God. Double hit it. There we go. As per usual, all of our horror news comes from bloodydisgusting.com. So this is, it's about a week out of date now, the article I'm reading, but hey, we take what we can get when it comes to new releases. And this may even give me something to watch on my next sort of free evening if it's available in the UK. But from John Squires, these are the 11 new horror films released last week. So, first up, after scaring up 30 million at the box office worldwide, the Valentine's Day themed slasher movie Heart Eyes is now available on digital at home, courtesy of Sony. Josh Rubin directed Heart Eyes with Mason Gooding and Olivia Holt starring in the romantic slasher. You can rent the film on digital outlets now for $19.99 or purchase it for $24.99. We've also learned that Heart Eyes will be slashing into DVD and Blu-ray on April 15th. The opening 10 minutes of Heart Eyes is now available online, which features 3 gory kills and introduces the legend and mythology of your new favourite holiday slasher villain. For the past several years, the Heart Eyes killer has wreaked havoc on Valentine's Day by stalking and murdering romantic couples. This Valentine's Day, no couple is safe. I would like to watch this at some point. Certainly, I'd have liked to have got to the cinema to watch it, but I think during the time of it being released, it just wasn't really possible, feasible to get down for that that screening. So I would like to watch it on home, but I'm not really a fan of the at-home premiere prices. It's just a little bit extortionate for what will usually amount to a one watch, especially if you're renting it, a one-time watch. So $19.99. I mean, I think for some reason in the UK we quite often match these prices. Not a case of we're just having the UK version of that American price, because $19.99 would be, I don't know, £15-16, maybe something like that. Pretty sure that ours show usually is rent for £20 or buy for $25. I could be wrong, but still. I normally, unless it's a film at the cinema that I'm really like, I have to see that opening night, you know, something like Alien Romulus or like other particular, you know, horrors that I'm really hyped for, I will usually use the Amazon Prime Odeon voucher. You get once a month, Monday to Thursday, 2 tickets for a tenner. So of course, if you take a friend or a partner, it costs you £5 each. That's a bargain. And outside of that, I'm part of the Cinema Society, so on other days I can purchase a voucher, so I get a bit of a reduction on price. You save about maybe 15 to 25%. It's worth having. It's decent. But I certainly wouldn't be spending £20 or £15 for a cinema trip. I'm not going to be spending that to just watch the film once at home. I'd maybe spend the £25 if I was buying a 4K version to own, but I would not be. I mean, when it comes to buying digital copies of films, I've only really done that when it's like a big discount, it's on sale, and you think, well, I could rent it for a couple of quid or for like £1 more, own it. I'll just own it because then watch it whenever. But you're also only really buying a license, so if the product goes off the service, then that license doesn't really matter, which is a bit shit. So we'll move on. But I'm interested to give that a watch. Not at that price, though. Next up, Charlie is ready to take the stage in the Screambox horror comedy film Cannibal Comedian from writer-director Sean Hates. A blend of laughs and terrifying thrills, the film is now streaming on Screambox. Written and directed by Sean Hates, Cannibal Comedian tells the story of a psychopathic cannibal who is fed up with his lack of ambition and takes a stab at stand-up comedy in an attempt to chase both his dreams and his victims. The film stars Aaron Prager, Austin Judd, and Robert Dunn, who with appearances from horror veterans Alan Danziger and Edwin Neal, best known for their iconic roles in Tobe Hooper's 1974 classic The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Their involvement adds a nostalgic treat for horror fans. I'm not really familiar with this. I don't think this has featured on the news previously. None of those names ring a bell. And Alan Danziger and Edwin Neal. I think Edwin Neal might have been the Hitcher, possibly. I'm not sure about Alan Danziger from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Maybe one of the guys. Not too sure. And Robert Dunn, Criminal Minds. The name vaguely rings a bell, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll have a quick little Google of Robert Dunn. I'm assuming they weren't a member of the BAU. I don't know who that is. We shall move on when the page loads. This is one of my only little gripes with Bloody Disgusting, whether it's Chrome or Bloody Disgusting, is the page freezes sometimes. We're moving on now. Promising. An adrenaline-fueled ride combining intense action with futuristic terror, Uncorked Entertainment brought Armed to digital and on-demand platforms on Tuesday. In Armed, a group of veteran Marines steal a shipment of weapons from the military only to find a Cold War-era robot that hunts them down, determined to complete its mission. Nothing can stop this deadly killing machine. Neil Mackay directed Armed, written by Terry MacDonald. The film's cast includes Omar Tucci, Rick Amsbury, Mason Cromwell, and Greg Johnson. Uncorked Entertainment's Keith Leopard previews. Armed delivers a thrilling ride from start to finish in this gripping paramilitary heist story. We're excited to bring this high-energy film to audiences who crave both original sci-fi and action content. Yeah, I know. I mean, the setup sounds like a more of a war version of that bit of a missed opportunity of a Christmas film with the name completely escapes me now, but the Santa Claus robot. And I remember that being an interesting setup, looked decent. The dialogue between the characters was just a Rob Zombie dialogue, which is a little bit disappointing. But yeah, the likelihood of me watching this, not for any particular reason, not because of the cast or whatnot, or not necessarily because of the setup, just I can't find myself reading that synopsis when I'm scrolling through streaming services and think, yeah, I'll allocate an hour and a half to this, personally. Next up, writer, director, producer Michael Verratti goes meta with There's a Zombie Outside, and Gravitas Ventures unleashes the film onto VOD outlets this past Tuesday. There's a Zombie Outside stars Ben Bauer, Felicia Wisser, Danny Plotner, Tai Chen, Francisco Chachin, William Lott, Tiffany Shepis, and Peaches Christ. Having once found solace in art, a man whose identity is intertwined with cult cinema soon begins to have issues distinguishing fact from fiction when he believes he's seeing a monster from his movies for real, leading him to question the very foundations of reality and himself. Yeah, I mean, interesting enough. Interesting enough. If this lands on a streaming service in the UK, yes. Enough for me to spend my hard-earned coin? No, possibly not. The title is a bit hit and miss. There's mention of an element of meta. Meta is something that I don't know. I'm always a bit funny when it comes to meta films. It's just it sounds redundant, but it takes me out of the story, and I guess that's the whole point. But not really for me. Next up, Suit Up, press start and kick putt with Gothic Slayers. Blending slacker comedy, horror, and adventure with 90s inspiration and arcade motifs, the film is now available on VOD. In Gothic Slayers, two putt-putt employees and best friends must face off against a demonic cult that has not only kidnapped their friend, but also threatens to destroy their hometown. Caleb Harris makes his feature directorial debut on the indie film from a script by Ben Getz and Dylan Eschbauer. Getz and Eschbauer star with Samantha Rothermel, Piper Verbrick, Quinn Hemphill, Jamie Day, Jason Bernard, David Andrew Morton, Sully Brown, Daniel Yeulo, and Melanie Rosedale. We couldn't be more thrilled to team up with Cranked Films to unleash Gothic Slayers upon the world, said Getz. Together, we're bringing you a 90s-inspired adventure comedy packed with laughs, thrills, and enough pixel-powered chaos to blow a fuse at the arcade. Grab your garlic, stock up on quarters, and get ready. So, I mean, again, when it comes to, when it comes to indie comedies, there's just this... I don't know. I think maybe I've just not seen enough decent indie comedies or indie dark comedies, slacker comedies, whatnot, whatever you want to call it, that are actually funny. I more often than not find myself going, okay, I see what they're going for here. I see what's inspired them. I'm seeing what they're doing a riff on, what they're doing a version of. But if I'm watching something and thinking it's a version of this, it's an attempt at that style, then it's just not engaging me. Like there's the SNL comedy troupe, Please Don't Destroy, I think they're called, which is very much. I watched their film, and I've seen a couple of their videos, and it's okay. But I saw their film on Sky, and I can't remember what it's called. It's like Foggy Mountain or something. And straight away, I was thinking, okay, they're heavily inspired by the Workaholics guys who do the "This Is Important" podcast, and I love that group. And because of that, I found myself just sort of going, these jokes really aren't quite, or these setups or whatever aren't really quite as funny, and I'm just seeing that they're attempting to kind of riff on that style. And even the Workaholics guys made a little joke about, they had a discarded joke and they said, "Oh, Please Don't Destroy can have that one," which I thought, okay, a little bit of a jab maybe. But again, I have to admit that when I'm looking at these films, I'm thinking they're going to get buried in the list on like Prime, for example. And maybe there's something good in there, but so far, I'm not being sold. Next up, Edward Furlong helped save humanity in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and now he has to do it again in Unspeakable Beyond the Wall of Sleep. Based on H.P. Lovecraft's 1919 short story Beyond the Wall of Sleep, the cosmic horror film hit VOD this week. It's the third Lovecraft adaptation from writer-director Chad Ferrin, following 2020's The Deep Ones and 2024's The Old Ones. Renowned ornithologist Ambrose London is summoned to Arkham Asylum to investigate a bizarre split personality case involving a patient seemingly possessed by a 122-year-old colonial peasant. What begins as a psychological study soon descends into unimaginable terror when London's dream machine unleashes an alien lifeform intent on world annihilation. Bei Ling, Ginger Lynn, Robert Miano, Lou Temple, Steve Railsback, and Cyril O'Reilly round out the cast. The film features practical effects by Joe Castro. On paper, Edward Furlong, if we're talking Edward Furlong, back in the day, mixed with H.P. Lovecraft, could work pretty well. He's done some decent features. He's done some terrible features, but Edward Furlong has done some decent features. Nowadays, I think with Lovecraft, it's one of those things where, as much of a fan as I am of the books, the short stories, the novellas, I've yet to see that many adaptations that I've thought, okay, this is nailed. I mean, we'll talk about some a bit later on, because it's not a case of that just not ever done well. But in terms of modern H.P. Lovecraft adaptations, they don't just rarely sort of nail it for me. I realise that for all these new films, I'm kind of just going, nah. But unless I hear that Unspeakable Beyond the Wall of Sleep is a doozy, then I can't see myself giving that one a watch personally. Next, praised by Stephen King as one of the best movies I've seen this year, The Rule of Jenny Penn was released in theatres from last week from IFC Films and will stream on Shudder later this year. Geoffrey Rush stars as a former judge, confined to a secluded rest home and trapped within his stroke-ridden body, who must stop an elderly psychopath, played by John Lithgow, who employs a child's puppet to abuse the home's residents with deadly consequences. George Henier, Nathaniel Lees, Thomas Sainbury and Ian Mune round out the cast. The New Zealand production was directed by James Ashcroft from a script he co-wrote with Eli Kent, based on the short story of the same name by Owen Marshall. The three creators previously collaborated on Coming Home in the Dark. Yeah, this is one. I mean, it helps that Stephen King said it's the best film he's seen this year. That's high praise. It's got a decent cast. I mean, John Lithgow, Geoffrey Rush. What more can you say with those two? So this is one where if I see that this is having a UK release, which I haven't heard anything about, I will definitely try and get down to watch it. A Shower. Fucking hell, we've got quite a few more, although the page has now stopped loading. So maybe we'll just talk about the next two. The producer of films, including Searching and Unfriended, Tima Bekmambetov returns to screen life horror with Bloat, which came to theatres and digital Friday. In Lionsgate's Bloat, after a near-death drowning accident, a young boy's family is horrified to discover he has become possessed by a legendary demon from the depths of the lake. As the family races against time to save the boy's soul, the evil monster inside the child tears the family apart as it seeks to destroy everyone in its path. The demon in question? The frog-like kappa from Japanese folklore. Ben McKenzie and Bojana Novacek star with Malcolm Fuller, Sawyer Jones, and Kane Kasugi. Writer-director Pablo Absento makes her feature debut on the film. Yeah, I'm sure that I have read a bit of that setup on... Maybe it is on Prime, it might have been in the store. But I did enjoy Searching and Unfriended, so I kind of feel like if I'm going to actually watch any of the films on this list that may be available now, then that may be the one. Let's have a quick look. Just see if it is available. Bloat. No, I don't want bloating pills. No. I'm going to say no because it's bringing me to cookbooks. So, getting back to the film list. Oh, by God, bloody disgusting. The whole website has crashed, so I don't think we'll be able to talk about any more of the new films because that list has died. So moving on, we've got a write-up from Megan Navarro now. A24's disaster comedy Y2K heads to Max next month. A24 Carl Mooney's dial-up disaster comedy Y2K wants you to party like it's 1999 next month when it heads to streaming. Y2K makes its streaming debut exclusively on Max on Friday, April 4th. The film will debut on HBO Linear on Saturday, April 5th at 8 p.m. ET. The disaster comedy explores what if the Millennium Bug really happened. In the film, two high school juniors crash a New Year's Eve party, only to find themselves fighting for their lives in this dial-up disaster comedy. Jaden Martell and Julian Dennison star as the high school friends. Y2K also stars Rachel Ziegler, Lachlan Watson, Mason Gooding, the Kid Laroi, Tim Heidecker, Eduardo Franco, Miles Robbins, Alicia Silverstone, Fred Hetchinger, Daniel Zolgardi, and Fred Durst. Y2K hails from actor, comedian, writer, and former SNL cast member Carl Mooney, who makes his directorial feature debut from a screenplay he co-wrote with producer Evan Winter. I do vaguely remember hearing about this, and it got decent enough reviews, but I don't think this ever landed in the UK. Or if it did, it was like a 1 week release. But I do remember seeing a lot of clips on social media of this and thinking, okay, this looks like it's kind of fun. Decent cast as well. Okay, moving on. Netflix is bringing Stephen King's Cujo back to life with a new movie. John Squire's write-up. Stephen King's Killer Canine is coming back to life, with Deadline reporting this afternoon that Netflix and producer Roy Lee are developing a brand new Cujo movie. The project will go out to writers immediately, Deadline notes in today's report. No other information has been announced at this time. Stephen King's horror novel Cujo was originally published in 1981, with director Louis Teague's classic horror movie adaptation being unleashed just 2 years later in 1983. Dee Wallace, Ed Lauter, Daniel Hugh Kelly, and Danny Pintaro star in the original adaptation of Cujo, wherein a friendly St. Bernard contracts rabies and embarks on a reign of terror. Yeah, I mean, Cujo, I have seen the film, but not for a very long time. I think because of it being a dog, and I'm a dog, I love my dogs, but because of it being a dog that I know is ultimately going to get put down, even though it's killing people, because of it being a pooch, I think it was one of those watches that I watched once, and that was kind of enough. I've not really had any interest in kind of going back to it. And the book is very good. The book is... The book is pretty intense in places. Not my favourite, but it was decent. It is a decent novel. A new adaptation. I mean, Roy Lee, some decent pedigree with it, I would say. Working with Netflix. I mean, possibly. I think, I'm going to have to remain cautiously optimistic. It's a very kind of straightforward story. There's not like a huge amount to it. There's not elements with it where I think, well, how will they adapt that? There's nothing cosmic in it, or nothing, where it could come down to the reader's interpretation how these things would play out. It's a pretty straightforward tale, I would say. So I don't know how you could do it wrong, but I could see if they tried to change it from a Saint Bernard to something different, or if they mutated it or went over the top. If they did something stupid like that, I think it would be it'd be too much. And I think with the new adaptation, they might try and go now for the original ending of the novel, which is quite tragic, and they switched it up a little bit for the 1983 adaptation. So maybe. Who knows? Next, some TV news. Late Night with the Devil star David Dutch-Malchian joins Dexter Resurrection. Alex DiVincenzo writes, the Dune and Late Night with the Devil actor will guest star as a character named Gareth. Currently in production in New York, the continuation of Dexter New Blood is expected to premiere this summer on Paramount Plus with Showtime. Michael C. Hall will reprise his role as serial killer Dexter Morgan alongside David Zayas as Angel Baptista, Jack Olcott as Harrison Morgan, and James Remar as Harry Morgan. Peter Dinklage will play the season's main villain, Leon Prater, a billionaire venture capitalist, with Uma Thurman as Charlie, a former special ops officer who serves as his right-hand woman. Kristen Ritter, Neil Patrick Harris, and Eric Stone Street will guest star. Other newcomers to the franchise include Natare Guma Mobano Mwine, Kadia Saraf, Dominic Famusand, and Emilia Suarez. Original Dexter showrunner Clyde Phillips returns, while fellow Dexter alumni Marco Seega serves as production director. He'll helm 4 episodes, with Monica Raymond directing the other 4. I still haven't got around to watching the prequel series that's out at the moment, Dexter Original Sin. I've heard decent things. I just haven't got around to it. I think when the news had come out that Dexter Resurrection was occurring, was being produced, I didn't really sort of pick up on it. I just assumed it was like another sort of spin-off show. But the fact it's a continuation of New Blood has me a bit confused, because I thought Dexter died at the end of New Blood. And now I'm thinking, right, okay. But will that mean then that Michael C. Hall is the dark passenger for Harrison? I wasn't really that fussed with the Harrison character. He was all right, but it was the typical, it's the angsty kid of our protagonist or anti-hero. Oh, God. They're a bit one-dimensional and mopey, but they're a good person at heart. But then they've got some of the bad traits. I thought New Blood was decent, but it wasn't amazing. And it was certainly, I think, better than the final, or what looked to be the case of the final couple of seasons of Dexter. I fell off of Dexter around season 6, I think. I might have finished season 6 and then skipped out in the last season or 2. I can't remember how many there originally were, 7 or 8. But New Blood was decent. It was all right. I thought it was okay. It didn't blow me away, but it did keep me watching, kept me interested. So a continuation, I don't know if they've announced how Michael C. Hall is returning, if he has actually somehow survived being. I'm sure he got like stabbed on a table. I don't know. He died. I'm pretty certain he died, but maybe that's more for me. Not sure. And then, finally, on the horror news, Jenna Ortega wants to star in the next Gremlins movie. This was from John Squires from just an hour ago. The Gremlins franchise returns next month for the second half of the second season of animated series Gremlins: The Wild Batch. And we've also heard recent rumblings about a third live-action movie finally starting to take shape. Warner Bros. Is reportedly exploring a new movie from original Gremlins writer Chris Columbus, but we'll believe it when we see it. One person who's hoping for a return to the Gremlins to the big screen? Jenna Ortega, who's no stranger to making her mark on iconic movie franchises. Ortega has thus far appeared in Scream, Beetlejuice, and the Addams Family franchises, and it sounds like her phone line is open for any and all calls regarding those adorable Mogwai and those nasty little gremlins. On the South by Southwest red carpet, where Ortega's latest movie, Death of a Unicorn, just premiered, the actress was asked what other mythical creatures she'd love to see back on screen. The question was posed by IMDb, and Ortega's answer revealed her love of the Gremlins saga. You know what I used to love as a kid? Gremlins, Ortega answered with a smile. Who would love Gremlins 3, 4? Call me. The next installment in the franchise would indeed be Gremlins 3, with Joe Dante directing both Gremlins in '84 and Gremlins 2, The New Batch, in 1990. Yes, that means it's been 35 years since the Gremlins movie rampaged up on the big screen, which is insane to think about given how popular the franchise and its lovable characters has remained throughout the years. But now, at least we have Max's original animated series, Gremlins The Wild Batch, to keep us company. Gizmo and the gang return to Max with brand new episodes on April 10th, 2025. It is bizarre how long of a gap there has been. And I do find that there comes a point where you just sort of think, if you're not going to do a continuation, we need to kind of stop talking about it. Or go down the typical route of let's try and do a reboot and then see how badly that goes and then do the legacy sequel to the originals. But talk of there being a new Gremlins, apparently there's now talk again of there being a new Goonies. And it's just like, if you're gonna have done these sequels, it just feels like it's been too long. Like, maybe they can recapture it. I mean, certainly with, Halloween 2018, and there's been other things where we go back to these nostalgia properties and are able to add a fresh new light on it, along with honouring the past and maybe, treading on the line quite a bit of the callbacks and the nostalgia hits. But if it does give us that reaction, gives us that feeling of, oh wow, yeah, this is great because it's similar to blah blah blah, then so be it. With Gremlins, I think there's potential because I think the stars of the show really are the Mogwai and the Gremlins. With the actors, we can have a new cast of actors, and then have the odd cameo later in the film. Is that Phoebe Katz and Zach, whatever his name is? I should have this information available. But yeah, with something like Goonies, I just think it's not going to be Goonies because it's going to be a new group taking on the mantle with the odd cameo here and there. So it's like, we'll just have a new film. Like, I don't know. It always just seems a bit hackneyed. Gremlins 3, if it happens, I'll give it a watch. But do I think it's going to be as good as the original 2? And I do like the second film. I know it's not very popular, but the second film was my Gremlins, similar to Ghostbusters 2. That was the film that I always saw growing up. Not sure. Anyway, the dogs are telling me that they want their dinner, so that is the end of the horror news. That was the news. And now it's time for reviews. Okay, so our only new review, and this is going to be fun, is the 2025 horror Mouse of Horrors, directed by, in the loosest possible term, Brendan Petrizzo, and written, surprisingly, by two people, Harry Boxley, Mark Gottlieb, starring Lewis Santa, Stephen Staley, and Chris Lines. So as with all our reviews, we're going to talk about the highs, lows, and I'm going to give you a score out of 10. As the blurb on this says, come for the thrills, stay for the kills. So, unsurprisingly, there isn't a Wikipedia page. There is simply a IMDb, which says, in a seaside town, chaos erupts as Dr. Rupert's monstrous creation stalks the night, harvesting body parts for a sinister purpose. No one is safe. Oh, God. Okay, so this essentially stars Natasha Ticini as Chloe. Do we have a bit more of a blurb further down? No? Okay. There's not much to go on. So I will go on my memory of the film. We're surrounded by people doing awful American accents. And straight away I was thinking, the setting looks kind of British, doesn't really make me think American. And the fact that you can normally hear when someone's doing an American accent and not just is American. And the opening, the two women at the start, it's just awful, and it really sets the scene for or sets the stage for this production to just have absolutely awful acting from the start. The basic setup is, there's a mutant mouse that is stalking this group who are at the fun fair. One of the girls in the group, Chloe, is going off to America for reasons, and it's kind of like a last hurrah with her friends. But one by one, they're being picked off by predominantly the killer, as is known in the cast, the Mickey Mouse type. The audio in this is fucking awful. There's moments when there's dialogue and there's this really loud buzzing sound. It basically what I think it came down to was the audio wasn't picked up on a mic properly, so they had to boost the levels to get any sort of dialogue, and then we're left with this really awful sound throughout quite a few scenes. I was initially thinking, is it something to do with like my audio drivers? Do I need to do some testing? And fortunately, with watching this live on Watch Along, it was confirmed that it's not just me. It's not just me. Like the audio mixing in this film is terrible. There's moments when there's dialogue and you've got music playing in the background, but the music is louder than the dialogue, and it's like, was the editing in this done like, right, hit one hit, load it up, cut it together as quickly as we can. Let's not bother actually going through the scenes and making sure, it's coherent, because this isn't. It is absolutely god awful. There's a moment when the mouse, the killer, attacks this one lad, and they're having a bit of a fist fight. He's got like a hook thing or something, I can't remember. And it's in broad daylight, so it already looks even worse. And the chap that he's attacking manages to pull his mask off, so it establishes it is a mask. Yes, it's not actually a mutant mouse, it is a mask. And he looks at his face. I don't know if he's meant to be horrified or nonplussed. It's hard to tell. And then the killer puts the mask back on. We never see his face. We don't actually see, right, so who is this? Is there a point to why they're wearing this mask? Because they're not actually like an actual mutant mouse, It's not a case of it's an actual mutant mouse, but it's a shoddy mask because of being cheap. No, it's just that's never really followed up on. There's also the bear in this, which is it's a Winnie the Pooh mask. It is Winnie the Pooh, except not known as Winnie the Pooh, not named as Winnie the Pooh, like Mickey Mouse isn't named as Mickey Mouse, but it is Winnie the Pooh. He gets eaten in half by a shark. I know I'm going into spoilers, but I want to try and save anyone from watching this that may even have the slightest inkling of, oh, maybe I'll give it a go. Save yourself an hour and a half. There's nothing redeemable in this film. The script is threadbare. The kills, I mean, there's one girl who gets like her eyes gouged out and her tongue cut out, and that bit was done kind of grisly. That bit was like, okay, maybe if the film was an absolute joke, this could have been quite a creepy scene. But by the point you get into that scene, it's just like, I can't even comprehend why I'm still watching this absolute trash. Is there anything redeemable about this? No. Is there anything really memorable about this other than how fucking terrible it is? No. Is this potentially one of the worst films I've ever seen? Yes. 1 out of 10. I don't know if I've ever given a film on here a 1 out of 10, but it's not deserving of anything more. It's just, and even when you get to the very end of the film, it's like, wait, what the hell's this meant to be? It's just this, there's attempts at CGI that are terrible, and I always tend to think that if you can't make CGI look at least passable, or at least like, okay, you know, all right, but it's a bit limited by the budget. If it looks absolute dog shit, like it was made in sixth form or GCSE, don't bother. Just don't do it. It automatically looks even worse. Yeah, 1 out of 10 for Mouse of Horrors. And now with our little retro review double bill, we're going to start off with The Dentist. So I'd been meaning to watch this for a little while. It's one of those films that I think I caught bits and pieces of on the Sci-Fi Channel back in the day. And for a long time, there's been like certain elements of the film artwork, and I suppose more so the artwork for the second film, that I remember seeing on VHS rental shelves in like Blockbuster or my local convenience store that did VHS rentals. And it's one of those films where I always thought, oh man, that looks kind of creepy, kind of schlocky, but it looks like pretty gnarly. But just never really got around to watching it. Or if it was on, I'd always catch bits and pieces, but never the whole film. Well, I figured, you know what? It doesn't seem to be having a UK release, but it is available on Prime Store. So I rented part 1 and part 2. So The Dentist, 1996 American slash film directed by Brian Yuzna and written by Dennis Paolo, Stuart Gordon, and Charles Finch. It stars Corbin Benson, Linda Hoffman, Earl Bone, and Ken Foree. Follows a successful but mentally unstable dentist in Los Angeles who begins committing murder. It's the first installment in the film series. So we'll talk a bit about the plot because there is a Wikipedia page, so I don't have to go on my terrible memory. And then I'll talk about what I liked and didn't like about the film. Dr. Alan Finestone is a Los Angeles dentist who, despite his professional success, quietly suffers from extreme obsessive-compulsive disorder and is preoccupied with cleanliness and perfection. On the day of his wedding anniversary, Alan discovers his wife Brooke is cheating on him with the pool man, Matt. After they finish, Alan retrieves his pistol and follows Matt in his car. He is led to Paula Roberts' house, a friend of Brooke's. Alan invents a story about a surprise birthday for Brooke and watches Paula invite Matt inside. Paula's dog attacks Alan and he shoots it in self-defense. After returning to his car, he drives to work. At his dental practice, Alan's first appointment goes poorly when he hallucinates a child patient having rotten teeth and accidentally stabs him. As Detective Gibbs investigates the death of Paula's dog, Alan sees his second patient, April Rain, a beauty queen. Alan hallucinates that she is his wife and, while she is unconscious, takes off her pantyhose and fondles her before attempting to strangle her. As she wakes, Alan snaps out of it and hides her pantyhose. Alan tells her manager, Steve Landers, played by Mark Ruffalo, in a surprising early appearance, that she is still dizzy from nitrous oxide. When Steve realizes what happened, he returns, punches Alan, and threatens a lawsuit. Alan ends the day early and sends his staff and patients home, including Sarah, a teenager who wants her braces removed. I can't actually remember what happens to Sarah in this film. Yeah, there we go. She's okay. Basically, I couldn't remember exactly what happened at the end of the film, but I'm jumping ahead here. So, yeah, sorry, I've completely sidetracked myself by reading further on the blurb. So, this is one of those films from a time that I do miss, and that is in this case, 90s, the mid-90s horrors. Straight to video, most likely. I think this was a straight to video release, at least in the UK. Man, there's just something about the sort of dodgy, almost MIDI-esque music. It's cordon anglais sort of themes. But they're quite snappy. They're quite instantly recognizable. They're not the sort that are instantly recognizable as like the Terminator theme. Like they're not going to enter the cultural zeitgeist. But in terms of being a fan of those 90s horrors, it's the sort that when you hear it, you're like, oh, okay, we're in for some schlocky, schlocky mess in this. Essentially, with the dentist, we are following around Alan, Dr. Alan, as his mental state deteriorates. And as you can imagine with a film about a dental serial killer, we're getting a lot of squirm-inducing moments when he's especially doing his work on the teeth, and we're seeing close-ups of particular teeth that he's scratching at or is stabbing the jawline around. And as the film progresses, his mental state gets worse and worse, and as does his attempts at dentistry and also his murders, in terms of like teeth extractions and tongue removal. It really does get pretty wild in places. It isn't like a slam dunk. I think where we've got a film where we are pretty much following the dentist 90% of the time, you don't get as much of a chance to build up the case of those around him, the protagonists. We sort of get bits and pieces of these characters and those that are starting to figure things out, or those that are asking questions. But it's never really enough that when something is to happen to them that we as an audience care that much. They're not throwaway characters entirely, but I do think that we could have spent some time away from Dr. Allen to build up the case against him. I do like how the ante is raised with his dentistry and his hallucinations, because his mind does start to go some strange places as the film progresses. It's not uber gory. It's quite suggestive in terms of the acts that he catches his wife and the pool boy in, and by the time it gets to the finale, it doesn't end on a grandiose note. It's not like we're leading to this big culmination and this big moment. It's more so a case of, I suppose, his reality becoming known to him, of what is real and what isn't, and ultimately sending him completely insane. I think that these are the sorts of films that I do miss, but I'm kind of glad that if there was a UK release of the physical media, that I didn't just go ahead and order, because whilst I'd been keen to give this a rewatch and to rediscover some of the moments in it, it's not brilliant. It's got decent performances, a pretty good cast, some earlier performances of a number of notable actors who, Mark Ruffalo has mentioned. But outside of some of the dentistry moments, there's not like a particular scene that I think would live on. It's not as if you say to the dentist, they go, "Oh, that's the film with that moment." It's just got some creepy set, like not even set pieces, just some creepy setups before deaths. But outside of that, it's kind of like a one and done for me. So The Dentist, I'm giving 6.5 out of 10, which then leads me on to the sequel. And this is the cover art that I remember. This is what was always in the VHS rentals section. And I'd always sort of think, God, that looks fucking horrifying. And it reminds me of a section from the novel of Stephen King's It, where Richie is conversing with Pennywise in the library, and Pennywise then appears as like Dracula, but Dracula with razor blade teeth, who then chomps down into his own gums and causes blood to go everywhere. It's a really, really visceral and creepy segment of the book. But I always just imagine the teeth to look like this, even though I had never rented the film and I probably caught maybe 20 minutes of it on TV once. It was just that image of the razor blade teeth from the cover art of The Dentist 2, You Know the Drill, or Brace Yourself, whatever the correct subtitle is. Brace Yourself, we'll say. The Dentist 2 is a 1998 American psychological slasher film directed by Brian Yuzna, starring the returning Corbin Benson, Julian McWhirter, Jeff Duchette, and Suzanne Wright, along with Clint Howard, who's a bit of a horror name. So In this film, Dr. Alan Feinstein is in the maximum security mental hospital he was sentenced to at the end of the first film. While talking to the psychiatrist, he remembers the murders he committed in his mind, while convincing the doctor that it was another man who did those things. His remorseful story distracts her from seeing him pull a sharpened tool that he stitched into his leg, and he uses her as a hostage to escape. Alan's wife Brooke is alive with new dental implants despite her missing tongue and inability to speak. She hires an investigator to find out where Alan has escaped, believing that he had been putting away money before he went crazy. Brooke has in her possession some postcards that Alan had left behind, and she believes he is in one of those places. Alan winds up in the small town of Paradise, Missouri, pretending that he has grown upset at life in the big city. He uses a previously established false identity of Dr. Lawrence Kane and has a bank account where he had been sending the money he skimmed off his practice to hide from the IRS. The bank officer, Mr. Wilkes, introduces Alan to his niece, Jamie, hoping that she can rent out her small cottage for Larry to live in so she could collect money from it. Jamie, who physically resembles Brooke, becomes the target of Alan's affections. When he has a problem with a cap on one of his teeth, Alan visits the inept town dentist, Dr. Burns, whom he takes an instant dislike to. Alan threatens Dr. Burns with the golf club, causing him to accidentally fall down the stairs to his death. Mr. Wilkes convinces Alan that he should take over as the new dentist for Paradise. Alan soon resumes his murderous ways with a passing tourist who accidentally recognizes him from Los Angeles. As with a number of these 90s sequels, 90s straight to DVD sequels, it is a case of diminishing returns, and we are once again following the dentist, Corbin Bernsen's Alan, the dentist, throughout 95% of the film. So we're never really building up the protagonist or the final girl element to the story. It is very much a case of we're following the antagonist who's almost like an anti-hero, but doesn't really work in that way. I think this film probably has, whilst it has not quite as good of a script as the first film, it does have a few more squirm-inducing moments. A bit more gore has been added to this film. In terms of, there's a torture scene, which is pretty grim, which then leads to teeth being extracted, which is pretty grim. And he works on this character's smile to give them a new smile. And that smile is essentially all the skin flayed off their cheeks. So their whole face is a massive gore smile. Pretty gnarly. And the moment on the cover art with the woman who's got razor blade teeth and no tongue, that is a dream sequence. So he doesn't actually do that to a character in the film. That is just a creepy dream sequence that he does have during one of his hallucinations. Some decent fight scenes in this. And I do think the finale is quite funny in terms of the reveal at the very end as the film leads into the credits. It's mad. It is mad. Is it as watchable as the first? I'd probably say it's more on par. It's not like a big step down, really, but I'd say if you're gonna watch the first, then you're not really gonna miss out if you miss the second one. But at the same point, watching the second one, it's not as if your experience for the dentist films is going to be worsened. If you've got a passing interest in 90s horror, 90s slashers like The Stepfather, those sorts of films, then The Dentist and The Dentist 2, I think, are worth a go. 6 out of 10 for The Dentist 2. Yeah, they're fine. They're fine. But would I spend £20-30 plus on a double film release? No. If they're on offer, £10-12, yeah, sure. But yeah, they're kind of, for me, one and done watches. Maybe in another 10 years I'll be like, oh, I fancy watching The Dentist. But I doubt it. So yeah, The Dentist 2, 6 out of 10. Now it's time for our feature presentation. Our feature presentation is going to be a pretty short one. I'm just going to sort of highlight a number of this directors, producers, screenwriters' films, because I want to go and have something to eat. I'm getting quite hungry. But surprise, surprise. But we're going to talk about some of the films of Brian Yuzna, an American film producer, director, and writer. Best known for his work in the science fiction and horror film genres. Yuzna began his career as a producer for several films directed by Stuart Gordon, such as Reanimator and From Beyond, before making his directorial debut with the satirical body horror film Society. He also served as a co-writer for the comedy Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Yuzna was the first American filmmaker to adapt a manga, Bio Booster Armor Guyver, into live-action feature The Guyver. He has directed several adaptations of the work of H.P. Lovecraft and has assisted many first-time directors, including Stuart Gordon, Christopher Gans, and Louise de la Madrid, in getting their projects made. So a bit of a legend in that regard. When I think Brian Yuzna, for me, I have to initially, my first thought goes to Society, even though I've seen Reanimator, From Beyond, and Dolls beforehand. And I saw Honey, I Shrunk the Kids many, many years ago. Haven't seen it for a long time. Always didn't like the bit when the ant gets killed by the scorpion. That's quite a traumatic moment. But I enjoyed that film. But I've seen those films prior, the H.P. Lovecraft elements of Reanimator and From Beyond, and Dolls, but I do think of Society first, the less H.P. Lovecraft and Dolls. But with Society, I always heard there's this, notoriety with it. It's infamous for a scene later in the film. And so a few years ago, I decided to give this a watch on, it must have been Shudder. If not Shudder, then Prime. And I believe that the particular moment in the film that comes later on is called the shunting. So, going into the film, I'm expecting this uber gory, intense horror. And for 75% of the film, it's not that. It's a mystery investigation with some element of sci-fi, of what is going on, who is part of this murder cult, human sacrifices. What's all this about? There's moments where you sort of have to question, what exactly have I just seen? Where someone's showering and they've got like a face in their back that you can sort of make out through a shower screen. People appearing where they shouldn't be, or body parts where they shouldn't be coming from. And it is very much a mystery film for the most part. Until we get to this thing called the shunting. So the shunting is a phenomenon in which they physically deform their bodies. So the characters in this are part of this secret society of social elite, but they're a different species to regular humans. They meld their bodies with each other into a near amorphous mass of flesh. As the orgiastic shunt continues, the guests feast on the nutrients from David's body, gruesomely absorbing and killing him. Their intention is to do the same to Bill, but he escapes and runs around the house, where he finds his parents and sister engaged in a similar activity. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the absorption part, they basically shove their hand, their arm up through David, which is as grim as you think, till the hand comes out through David's mouth, putting its fingers through his eyes, I'm pretty sure, and then pulling his face through his own mouth. It's one of those things where once you've seen it, you're just like, fucking hell. That the rest of the film does not set you up for that finale. And there's something with, I don't know if Brian Yuzna uses the same practical effects people for a number of his projects, but a lot of his films have this really decent practical effects style where it's not like it's uber realistic, but it doesn't look shonky and dodgy. It's generally quite cringeworthy, but in a good way, in terms of just some gnarly body horror effects or gore. We go back to Reanimator, which he produced, and From Beyond he produced two Stuart Gordon H.P. Lovecraft adaptations, and they're both great. I mean, Reanimator I think I probably prefer slightly to From Beyond. From Beyond is, again, it's another film where, similar to Society, it's not so much that I remember the film for the plot. It's more so that I remember it for being really grim in places and really nasty gore, but just with that same sort of feel, that same sort of 80s feel. It's really very much like a postcard in time. From Beyond has got this horrible eye-sucking moments, which are as they sound. Bride of Reanimator, he wrote, directed, and produced. I thought was okay. To be honest, I didn't think it was amazing. And then Return of the Living Dead, which is on screen now. Return of the Living Dead 3. Probably the last decent Return of the Living Dead film, and it's not even that great. We watched it on a watch party a number of years ago. 1993 romantic horror film, directed by Brian Yuzna, written by John Penning. None of the Return of the Living Dead films are really super related. Like they do have the same. The first three have the same cause of the zombie outbreak, but it's not like necessarily returning characters as far as I'm aware. But with Return of the Living Dead 3, we get a lot of body horror in this one in terms of more, I suppose, modifications, where one of the characters, the love interest of our lead, has been infected with the zombie virus, and to try and stave off the turn, pain. They utilize pain on themselves, which includes basically putting like shards of metal and glass in their face and claws and stuff on their arms, and it's pretty crazy. And they encounter other characters who are just as weird, and it's just this madcap bonzo energy that is prevalent in Return of the Living Dead 3, which does harken back to the same sort of feel of From Beyond and Society. We also talked about The Dentist 1 and 2. As we get into the later productions, such as Arachnid and Dagon, Dagon being another Stuart Gordon release, we're getting into the 2000s, and use of CGI is starting to creep into more and more productions because of, it's kind of cost saving and you can do a lot more with CGI. Dagon has potential, and I remember I picked up the Spanish Blu-ray because I'd wanted to watch it for a while. I'd remember catching a bit of it on Prime once, but by the time I went back to actually watch it properly, it wasn't there anymore. It's based on The Shadow of Innsmouth, a novella from H.P. Lovecraft, but it is hampered by the CGI in it. The story's pretty good. There's some pretty gnarly effects in it with like the fish people who've kind of got like razor blade smiles. That's creepy. Story's decent. CGI not so much. Definitely drags it down a bit. But what I would say that I was quite surprised with is I got around eventually to watching Beyond Reanimator, the third and currently still last installment in the Reanimator series. Seeing that he was directing as opposed to Stuart Gordon, and I think at that time I hadn't been aware that he'd also done Bride of Reanimator. I assumed Stuart Gordon had done Bride of Reanimator. So I had this feeling like, oh, well, the artwork looks kind of cheap. It's just like a still image of Jeffrey Combs' character on the front cover with a syringe with bars behind him because he's in prison. I initially thought that the film just looked a bit cheap and tacky. It's actually pretty damn good. It's very practical effects heavy. The gore and violence still has that, I would say, almost Yuzna specific feel and tone to it. And it's definitely a film that I think kind of got, it would have done better if it was released in the mid-90s as opposed to 2003. I think by that point were there still fans of the Reanimator series? Maybe not so much as now. It's probably sort of became a bit buried in the straight to DVD release era. But it's actually a lot of fun, and it's very madcap with some of the action later on as more and more people are getting experimented on in the prison. It definitely exceeded my expectations. And outside of that, he hasn't really worked on a film directly since 2011's 60 Seconds of Solitude in Year Zero, which he directed as an anthology film. 2010's Amphibious, but he was an executive producer on 2023's Suitable Flesh, which had some positives to it. I did think it was a pretty weird film. It's an adaptation of The Thing on the Doorstep. We reviewed it with the Gruff a little while back. There's some good moments in it. Heather Graham is in it. I did like the story generally. I think once it got going, it was much better. To begin with, I sort of kept thinking, is this just a bit of an erotic thriller or something? But yeah, I'm glad he was involved in that. Executive producing, I don't know how much involvement there was, but Suitable Flesh is definitely worth a watch and is available currently, I believe, still on Shudder. So check that out if you haven't already. Right, Ghouls and Fiends. I did say it was brief, but it was a little bit of a look at some of the films that I have seen, that I've enjoyed, of the filmography of Brian Yuzna. Getting on a bit now, so I'm not sure if we'll see him step behind the camera again. May well be enjoying a well-earned retirement, but if you're not familiar with Brian Yuzna, but you maybe have seen From Beyond or Dolls, Reanimator, Silent Night, Deadly Night 4 and 5, I know he's been involved in. I've not seen any of the sequels to Silent Night, Deadly Night. I would say give some of these films a go, because if you have enjoyed, for example, From Beyond, then you may well get a kick out of the same levels of gore and practical effects in Society, in Return of the Living Dead 3, in The Dentist, a number of other features. They all do have that feel to them, and I think that's a great touch. So there we have it. Right, Ghouls and Fiends. Thank you very much for watching or listening, whatever platform you are enjoying this on, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. If you are a Patreon, you get this show 48 hours early. So if you would like to be a Patreon, patreon.com/Ministry of Horror. The regular podcast goes out 48 hours early on that platform. I will generally do a weekly blog every so often, my Monday musings, Wednesday musings, whatnot, what have you. If I have been to the cinema to see a new horror film, I will try to record a post-film thoughts. Not so much a review, not so much spoilers, but just what are my initial feelings, because quite often I need to sleep on a film to really sort of digest what I think about it and what I enjoyed, if I did. So consider that there's a number of different tiers, and just to mention, we have free tiers, a free tier, and then we have other tiers where there's different things available on those tiers. One of those things is a new monthly show with my fiance Victoria called 90 Slay Fiance. First episode is out now. We talk about Mulholland Drive. She has opinions on that, and we'll be recording the next episode this weekend. It'll be her first time viewing The Blair Witch Project. So the setup of the show is I show a horror film to Victoria that she's never seen before, and we get her insight into it and whether she liked it or not, and why. It's a lot of fun. We have a cocktail while we watch we talk about the film. We don't watch the film on the show. But there's talk of doing a live show in the future. So watch this space. Also twitch.tv/Tezz, TEZZIUS. We do gaming streams on there, but there's also the odd live horror show. Try and give the show a follow if you're not already. We're so close to hitting 100 followers, which would be really awesome for us, for our growth. Share it round to your family and friends. We also are pretty close to hitting a subscriber count, which is going to be quite useful, because really trying to push that to aid with the wedding fund and honeymoon budget. So if you want to donate, to buy me a cup of coffee or help with the budget, there is a PayPal donation button on there. That's the end of the shills. I also have to give out a shout out to our patrons on Patreon. patreon.com, which is Bericles, The Gruff, and James. Thank you very much for your continued support, guys. Be sure to share it out if people want to join as free members. They can, and it just helps build the show's appearance on the Patreon platform. Anyway, girls and things, thank you very much. I will catch you again next time. Goodbye.